Hi, I'm Rainer and welcome to my training room. I am going to take you for a little quick tour of the lower track on the upper deck of my layout. It's the only part where I actually have like a continuous loop by flipping a couple of the turnouts in a certain direction. So I will just take you for a quick cab ride of the tour, and then I'll come back to what I want to talk about today. Okay, so we started out right about here. I had that house sitting right here, and then I took you around for a clockwise loop of the layout. And if you notice, everywhere else in the layout other than on my duck under and over here, I actually have a shell of scenery. Now, this is not what I want the scenery to look like eventually, because this is supposed to represent Northern Ontario with a lot of trees. So a lot of these hills at the other end that look kind of barren with cliffs, eventually those will have a lot of trees on them and be fairly heavily forested. That's the plan. I just haven't gotten all the trees built and planted, but I do have a scenery shell on the rest of this upper deck of the layout other than this corner. And you noticed when I did the tour, I had this lumber mill building right here, and that's where it's going to be. I'm going to put my lumber mill here. So what I've decided to do today is, number one, get the rest of the track work that I need to do in this corner, because right now I have one turnout over here that comes out, but there's no track here, and I need to put in the tracks that I want to service that lumber mill. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. So I was just kind of positioning things here. So what I'm hoping to do is create an extra siding down here and a couple of spurs to service the lumber mill. So that's the first thing I need to do. Once the track is in place and working, then I'm going to start working on the scenery, and I'm going to be doing some rock cuts, cliffs, because I don't want to create too much of a slope down here, because I need this flat space, so I need to make it fairly abrupt. So I'm going to make some kind of a transition from here to, and then have a fairly steep hill around the corner of that, and get the rest of this covered, painted, so there's no more pink styrofoam up here. So first thing, get the tracks in place. I'm not going to record the whole process. Nobody's going to watch anyway, but I will show you once I get the tracks positioned, and then I'll come back to how I do the rock cuts in the hills and the cliffs and things like that. So with that, let's get back to getting some work done. Okay, so I have reworked my tracks over here, and I added a turnout right here into the main line going around, and another one right here. Added a little short curved siding. Not ideal, but when you're working with a lumber mill that's in the corner and you want to add a siding, it's kind of the only option I had here. And then I've added this little spur here, and my idea is that's going to be for loading train cars with the finished product. Yes, it's a little bit short, but this is the problem we have in model railroading. We're always having to compress things a little bit more than we want to, at least with a limited space. And then over here, I already had this turn out in over here. Hopefully you can see it on the camera, probably not because I'm blocking it. And so I've added a second one out of that, and that comes out into 2 tracks that are going to be theoretically the log unloading tracks for the raw materials coming in. So the lumber mill building that I've got sitting over there temporarily fits right in here. I put little marks on the styrofoam with the Sharpie so I know what the outside building dimensions are. And I have, just randomly cut some chunks of styrofoam around the outside to fill in the gaps, and then I'm going to be putting plaster cloth next over it. And then I also have bits of rock. These are going to be rock face because it is going to be in a drop from the track, the rear track down to the front. And if I put too much slope, it uses up the real estate for the building. So I thought that would be a good place to put some rock cuts. The way I make these pieces of rock cut is, this is just casting plaster. And I take some tin foil, crumple it up into kind of a loose ball, straighten it out, put it in a old baking pan just to collect any water or mess that I might make, and make like small trays out of the crumpled aluminum, mix up some casting plaster, pour it into the aluminum, let it harden overnight, and then the next day I can just peel the tin foil off, and I have this rock, this randomly crinkled surface. That's what I've done on many of the other rock surfaces and rock cuts around this layout. You can see that in some of my older videos. So that's what I did here. Those are also now glued in place with the glue gun. And so the next thing to do is I'm going to put plaster cloth to kind of cover all of the styrofoam and create the general curve of the terrain. And then after that, drywall compound will go on top of that. And then the whole thing will get painted. So that's what I'm going to start working right now, is the plaster cloth, and try to capture it all with my camera over here. Hopefully it keeps running, and hopefully you'll be able to see how I do this part. So this is at the stage I'm at now. Got the plaster cloth on there, let that dry, harden for a little while. Then I mixed up some sheetrock 20. It's a drywall patching compound that dries pretty fast. 20 minutes, it says. Might be a little more than that. But it does start to harden and set up pretty quickly. So I then mixed up a fairly watery mix of that and brushed it on top of all of the plaster cloth areas to seal it up, and just to give it a little bit different texture so it doesn't look like cloth. And then I actually put a small fan on there to blow some air on there to get it to dry a little bit more. So I'm hoping it's dry enough. It's starting to feel like it is, that I can put some of the paint on there. I think what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go get my brown paint and a paintbrush. And yeah, it's this same brown paint I've used everywhere else. I'm going to give it a coat over top of all of this. And then once that brown paint has dried, then I am going to start getting some black paint and start painting these rock faces. But while this stuff was drying, I actually went to an antique market with my wife and picked up a couple of interesting little things. One is this Camino scale models. It's a Central of New Jersey, an old wooden Craftsman kit boxcar. It's all made out of wood, and looks like all the parts are there. So I picked that up, got it for a really good price. And then I also bought Bertani's Billiards, this JL Innovative Design. I don't know why it's in an antique market, because it's not an antique, but still, it's a good price for this kit in there, so I picked it up. And another kit to add to my stack up here, so hopefully I'll get to that sometime. So that'll be fun. It's always good to keep looking for these things. You never know where you can find things, and never built a boxcar kit like this, so that's going to have to be an upcoming video as well once I get to that. So, but for now, I'm going to get back to getting the brown paint out and painting this and moving forward with this corner. So this is how it looks now. I have all the basic scenery shell painted, put a coat of brown paint over everything, sprinkled a little bit of ground foam in, at least on the tops of the hills, not so much where the building needs to go. No sense having that under the building. Any of the plaster cast rocks, as well as these completely vertical parts, which realistically in the real world would not be brown dirt going completely vertically. It's going to fall down. So just to be more believable, painted those areas as well. So I just used some of the black acrylic paint, just brushed it on, and then after that used some gray, just kind of lightly brushed some gray over the top, and then used a little bit more white just as a little bit of highlights on it. Now, in this case, I didn't even let the paint dry between the different colors because I actually want it to blend a little bit, and that's the beauty of using these types of artist paints. They're nice and thick, they're not liquid, so you can brush a little bit on top and it stays there, and you can get variations and everything like that that natural rock has. So that's why I like doing it that way. So at this point, it still looks like a very barren landscape. It still needs, you know, plants, trees, other things like that on it. So I'll be working on that later. You know, all along here, I'm going to probably put some more plants kind of hanging down, kind of like I've done on my rocks over on the other side. And I'll be planting some trees. I need to make some trees with a fairly narrow width to fit along the top of there, so that they kind of hide the track up there, but so that the trains don't actually hit the trees. So I'm going to be working on that later, but not right now. So my next plan for this area is I need to run some feeder wires up to the tracks because right now they're all being fed from one location. So I need to run some feeder wires up to the tracks. I also need to do some soldering on some of the rail joints, things like that. And then after that, I want to actually paint the tracks, because right now they're the, you know, shiny nickel silver tracks with the black ties, and there's some of the pink styrofoam showing through and things like that. So once I get all the electrical parts sorted out for the tracks, I'm going to be pulling out the airbrush and doing a little bit of painting on those. But I think that's enough for this video. Gives you an idea of how this last corner that was pink styrofoam on the upper deck is now no longer pink styrofoam. So this is a good start. At least, you know, when I run a train around, we have some type of landscaping on the entire upper deck, other than the duck under, which is not going to get landscaped. So that's the situation right now. The other thing I need to start doing is running some wiring for my building lighting, and I will show that in an upcoming video as well, because this building has lights in it. That building up there has lights in it, and I have a switch over there, but the wiring in between needs to all be done. So I'm probably going to run some of those wires at the same time that I'm running the wires to the tracks, but I'll show that in another video. So hopefully this is, again, like my other videos, hopefully this is helpful to somebody. Gives you some ideas of how you can fairly easily, simply get some landscaping on your layout. It makes a huge difference when you're taking pictures or video or anything like that. Just to look at it, it creates a setting for the buildings rather than just the bare plywood. So hopefully it gives you some ideas. If you want to see more of what I'm doing, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And thank you for watching, and see you next time.